And as I stated on Facebook, especially on our KRMS webpage, that we are going to be talking with a couple of different folks. In particular, we're going to be talking this hour with Dan Wass, and he is the author of the book Good Gun, Bad Guy. This is the second go-around for Dan, and he is joining us this morning, and we'll be joined a little bit later on in the hour by Jan Morgan, the First Lady of the Second Amendment. That's hour number one. And in hour number two, Professor Jim Paisley and Dr. Marvin Schultes will be with us, and we're going to talk First Amendment in the second hour. Joining us this morning, as I indicated, Dan Wass, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical. Dan, good to have you with us this morning, and I got to say, it's great to have taken the opportunity over the last several weeks to kind of get to know you a little bit. We're Facebook friends, and it's certainly great to have you on the program this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Kevin, how are you, pal? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely outstanding, and this is an interesting book. As a matter of fact, we mentioned Jan Morgan here, and Jan was actually someone who had told me a while back, before the book had officially come out yet, that I needed to get you on the air, and we need to talk about this, because this is a very interesting story, how this has all taken place. It says, of course, in your bio, you were a musician, and probably still are, and you've done a number of other interesting things. But you had always been on the other side of the argument, I guess, when it comes to gun control, being more of someone who supported the other side, the anti-gun lobby, or if you want to call it that. And then for some interesting reason, you kind of made the change and came from anti to pro. And as we get into this discussion this morning, first off, obviously, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us a little bit about what made you kind of change over, as far as what something that occurred in your life, or something that was really predominant that made you decide that, hey, I'd been looking at this the wrong way for a long time.
Sure, and that's pretty close. I grew up in a lower middle class suburban household. My dad had guns. He had rifles, shotguns, handguns, and we went out and we'd target shoot, and even went hunting. I wasn't very good at hunting, but we did some target shooting. We had a great time. It brought my dad and me together, and I didn't have any issues with guns. It just wasn't my thing. I was a guitar player since I was the age of 9, and I ended up touring in bands, rock bands, and through my teens and 20s. But so I didn't necessarily have any issues with guns. I just didn't take a position on them very much. It was just something kind of like my dad kind of did this, and that was great. But there was a time, I guess in my 20s, where I kind of got taken in by some of the anti-gun, rhetoric and that narrative that's out there, and all the hype, all the anti-gun, nonsense and propaganda. I started to buy into it. And my dad had been gone. He died when I was 24. So I kind of got sucked in. And it was a situation where emotion and fear and that whole sort of thing kind of took over logic. Because logically, I knew we had guns in the house all the time, and nothing bad ever happened. But still, the emotion took over, and I think influence of our surroundings is very important here, because it really does influence people. The more we are subjected to that sort of rhetoric and that sort of narrative, whether it's true or not, whether it's accurate or not, it doesn't matter. If you're exposed to that sort of thing, it starts to take a hold. Anyway, logically, I started eventually to realize that, wait a minute, if bad guys have guns, why am I, denouncing them and choosing to not have them? I started to say to myself, well, hey, if they're going to have them, I should have them too. And I tell the story in the book, but eventually my wife and I had a situation where we were in a bit of a struggle with some guy, and in that moment, I was pretty concerned, and I had an aha moment. You've heard the aha moment.
Sure.
Where everything kind of lines up and falls into place, and you say, wait a minute, the way I've been thinking just isn't quite right. What happened? I tell the book in detail. Tell the story in the book in detail. But eventually, my wife and I got back to the car, and, I apologized to her. I said, I'm sorry. She said, what are you apologizing to me for? You didn't do anything. It was that guy. And I said, yeah, but I apologize because I don't know. This was a big guy and big angry guy, and he wanted a piece of me. And in that moment, I told her, I said, I didn't know. I don't know if I would have been able to defend you. And look, my job as a husband, as a man, is my responsibility is to protect my family. So, that aha moment kind of happened right there. And I told her, I said, look, I'm getting a gun. And she came from kind of a non-gun family, not necessarily anti-gun, but kind of a non-gun family. So working her into the process was a bit challenging, and as I was kind of working myself back in. But luckily, I had a lot of good friends around me to help me and retrain me, and we talked a lot about the responsibilities. That's a huge thing too. But that's kind of how it happened. So during my research, as I developed for the first time a strong, healthy pro-gun stance, with reason to back it up, I started to notice the anti-gun rhetoric really clear. But now I started to see it from a different perspective. Before I was kind of in it, and it kind of felt like I was part of it. And as I started to look at it from the outside with logic rather than fear, anger, and emotion, I started to take a completely different view, and I started to look, and I started to recognize all the misleading things involved in that they do, really, to kind of pull people in.
Do you as a family man now? I don't know if you have any kids or not, but
I do. I'm a 17-year-old.
You said that you said that there was an experience in your life that occurred, and it really kind of got you back into the mode of wanting to not only protect yourself but to protect your family. And with your wife coming from a background where maybe firearms weren't necessarily a big part of her life, was she very accepting of this at first? Was she very argumentative? Was she saying things like, I really wish you'd reconsider. I really wish that, you'd think about what could happen if that gun falls into the wrong hands. Was she supportive? Was she semi-supportive? Was she not supportive at all? I'm always curious because, I think a lot of couples, when they first get together and there is that conversation over maybe a firearm being in the house, even if it's something as simple as a .22 or maybe a .22 handgun, there's always that huge debate because of any number of contributing factors. What was that? What was that like as far as your wife was concerned?
She trusts me. She trusts my beliefs. She trusts my my judgment. She was scared though. Of course, like I said, she came from a non-gun family. But as we worked through it, and she saw me training. She saw me educating myself, and I educated her at the same time. We're looking at safes, we're looking at holsters, all sorts of everything that's involved in it. Mm-hmm. And she started to understand, and now it's funny now because we could be in a place where that might not be the most desirable place or might not be the safest place, and she asked me if I'm carrying. So it's kind of funny. So she does recognize it now. She appreciates it, and she respects it.
Has she herself gotten involved on any level as far as learning about firearms or wanting to go out and actually own a firearm and herself getting involved? There's so many women's groups now that pop up across the country, Girl with a Gun, Well-Armed Women, all kinds of different groups that really cater to women. And it's more of an opportunity for women to learn about the use of firearms. A lot of women who have never, ever even considered picking up a firearm, owning a firearm. Is she more actively involved? And then how is that relationship developing between you and your 17-year-old son?
My son loves it. We go to the range. He's a great shot. But my Sue, my wife, she's still not there. She's not a gun owner yet, and the 45 was a little much for her.
Yeah.
But But no, she's not quite there yet. But I'm slowly getting her there, and this is an important piece. I think that if you have a family member that's not on board, get them on board, and because I don't think this is something that we can half-heartedly do. I don't think this is something we can negotiate. Well, I'll carry when I'm not with you, or I'll carry when I'm, here at this location or there. I don't think it's a matter of that. I think it's a matter of getting your wife, your husband, or whoever, get them on board and get them educated. Because once you get the information, and once you learn, the fear goes away. That's the amazing thing about fear. It's really just a lack of information, a lack of data.
Absolutely.
Once we get it, so you agree. I mean, and once we get it, the fear is gone. So
I think it's interesting because of the fact that it seems like education is always something that combats fear. And once people get the education, but I've also found that sometimes you have to let them kind of get into it on their own. You have to maybe, offer them the opportunity if they're interested, but you don't want to force them. You don't want to be overbearing, and you don't want to push them into something that maybe they're not ready for right away. And sometimes it does take a little time for them to get comfortable, to find some of these other groups and organizations and to work through them in order to overcome their fear through the education and then the actual opportunity for the application, if you will, by purchasing a firearm, going out, learning how to properly use it, how to store it, how to do everything that's necessary in order to keep yourself safe and not cause anyone else harm. 9:25 is our time. Dan, we're going to step aside, take a quick break. We'll come back and talk some more with Dan Wass, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy. We'll talk more about the anti-gun lobby and get some ideas and thoughts on what Dan started to see, what he started to hear, and again, how he came to write the book, Good Gun, Bad Guy. We'll be joined a little bit later on in the hour by Jan Morgan, who wrote the foreword for this particular book as well. You're listening to the Morning Magazine on KRMS. The Ozarks. Our guest, Dan Wass. The name of the book is Good Gun, Bad Guy. And Dan, you were telling us about a family experience that kind of got you back into the mode of when you were growing up as a kid and looking at bringing firearms back into your life, into your family's lives. And let's talk a little bit about the anti-gun lobby and some of the things that you really started noticing as soon as you kind of switched. I guess if you want to call it a switch, I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily like a switch that you flip or a mindset that you regained over time. But let's talk a lot about the anti-gun lobby and the things that you were really starting to notice, and obviously with what happened in Orlando just this weekend. I think we're hearing a lot of that in the media from politicians and the like who want to strip us of our rights, strip us of our guns, and really put the criminals in a position of an advantage over us at this point.
Well, yeah, Kevin, I will talk about some of the things I noticed. Let me just first explain that there are two groups of anti-gunners here, and they work together. And I don't think people realize this, but it's not just people who don't like guns. In the book, I profile anti-gunners into two groups. You have the anti-gunner, which is typically someone who doesn't like guns, they're fearful of guns, they never had any real experience with guns. They don't necessarily want our rights to go away, but they would be happy if guns just kind of magically disappeared. They don't, they'd be happy with heavy gun restrictions. Anti-gunners are typically people that have been misled by the media. So that's the anti-gunner. And you have the anti-Second Amendment radical. These people may have a lot of the same traits as the anti-gunner, but they do want your rights taken away. They don't want you to have guns. They don't want you to own them. And they'll do anything and everything, use any strategy, any tactic possible to make sure that you don't have the ability to own or carry or have guns. These are the people that would be cheering in the streets should the Second Amendment ever get repealed. What I noticed was anti-gunners have a very important tool, a very effective tool, and it's terminology. You've heard the term gun violence.
Sure.
Why do you think they put those two words together, gun violence? And why do you think they use it every chance they get? Because it makes you think of something. It changes your internal representation about guns. Another one is assault weapon. This term assault weapon didn't even exist in America until the 90s, until anti-gun politicians injected it into the conversation, and they pound it into the narrative every chance they get. It's used to vilify guns and scare people. Now, we all know, obviously, we know that the gun doesn't assault, rather a bad guy does. Without the bad guy, the gun would just sit there. But it's important that they use these. Another one is Wild West, and we can get into that. The terminology that they use creates a narrative and creates imagery, and this influences people's beliefs. And their beliefs ultimately influence their thoughts, and their thoughts affect the decisions and choices they make every day. So, let me give you an example. Got another second up. Here's an example. Kevin Burns, 6 years old. His father says, "Kevin, just want to tell you something. All red cars are faster than all other cars." And you're like, Kevin's like, "Okay, well, whatever, Dad, that's cool. Okay, whatever, red cars are faster." Now, let's say your dad just keeps telling you that through your life. Red cars are faster, red cars are faster. So your childhood, you just grow up believing red cars are faster. In your teens, you believe red cars are faster because people keep telling you that. There's no logic behind it, and, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. But, somehow you believe that manufacturers are building in more horsepower in red cars. So Kevin is now 20 years old. He likes to go fast, buying a car. How do you think that belief influences his car buying decision?
Sure.
And then now fast forward to 35 years old. Kevin's 35. He's got two little kids sitting in the car seats in the back, and he's got a wife, and he needs to find a safe, reliable family vehicle. He goes to the dealer. How do you think Kevin's belief of red cars, or the notion that red cars are faster, is going to play into that buying decision?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what's happening to anti-gunners. They're being programmed to believe that guns are scary. They're the root of all that's evil in this country, and we should be very scared of them. So, here's the thing. We have to ask ourselves, does pushing FBI data in their face, is that going to change their belief? And that's the question I started asking myself, and the answer is absolutely not. There's a different problem here. There's a deeper layer that we need to be talking about. We're talking about guns and restrictions and statistics and how many rounds you can have in your magazine and all this nonsense. But really, anti-gunners are hard at work taking away our right to own guns. And that's the thing. And it's not only that, but it's the manipulation of the anti-gunners. They're being manipulated to believe all this nonsense, and they're turning into anti-gun warriors. And this is what we're fighting with. This is the layer that nobody's talking about. This is what I bring up in the book. That's why it's called Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical. Mm-hmm. Because there's stuff going on behind there that the media is just not covering. We're just on the surface right now.
Well, I think that's always been the case, and in a lot of instances there are directions the media will go, there are directions the media won't go, there are places that they'll visit, there's places that they won't visit. Obviously, a large portion of what we ingest in our daily lives is based on what we see on the news, of course, what we see in social media, the way it's approached. And again, the conversation always kind of revolves around, you talk about the terminology, gun violence, assault weapons, assault rifles. In particular, the weapon that was used in Orlando in the nightclub shooting, it wasn't an AR-15, and that's what it was originally reported as. But did anybody bother to do the homework and research for themselves? No. In large part, most people believed what they were told by the media, and that's exactly what people want you to buy into. What you hear in the news is the gospel, and anything else is just rhetoric brought on by a group of crazy people, brought on by people who are in love with guns and that's their life, and that's what it's all about. It's, again, another place that we hear about seemingly all the time, Dan, is the violence that continues to go on in places like Chicago. People shooting one another, innocent children being shot by stray bullets, things along those lines. So, and that's really never focused on. We do hear about it, but where's the focus? Where are people going in and trying to do something to stop this violence? And again, you just it's always made out to look like people with guns are criminals, and then everybody is always kind of lumped into that pile, and I find that to be somewhat. What's the word I want to use? I guess the way the media portrays people as you can look at the administration, you can look at any administration. Once they get on some sort of a kick about gun control, then anybody who owns a gun is a bad person, and they want to lump us all into this same category, this same group, right, that we might be crazy. We could slip a disc in our brain anytime and go nuts and go on some sort of a
exactly.
killing spree, and that's not true at all.
No, exactly. They want you to believe that if we allow, see, this is the crazy thing, if we allow people to carry, and if we allow people to carry, then we're going to have the Wild West somehow. Mm-hmm. Somehow, people are going to be shooting each other in the produce section. I mean, they want you to see this stuff. They want you to envision it. And you mentioned Chicago, and I got to say, you're right. There's this hypocrisy. In America, we have over 1 million violent acts per year, 1.1, 1.2, I don't know, something like that. That number is heavily influenced by pocket areas. They're key areas. There are places like Chicago, Detroit, Washington, D.C. These areas are highly gun-restricted areas. This is the crazy part about it. They're highly gun-restricted areas. They're Democrat-run. So you would think that if anti-gun politicians really wanted that number to go down, the violent crime number to go down, that they would revisit their failed anti-gun policies. But, so they don't. So it led me to ask myself, and I hope that your listeners are asking themselves the same question. Do the high numbers of violent acts in violent crime in America help or hurt the anti-gun agenda?
Do they help it or do they hurt it? Well, obviously, as far as the anti-gun agenda goes, they help it, and that's why you're never going to see this type of thing wiped out.
Exactly. So there's the big question: are they really working to fix the problem? Are they really working to save lives? Do they really want to save lives?
Absolutely not.
Well, some would think. Many people would agree with you.
I would think that one of the interesting things that you continue to hear about and you continue to read about, or the media always feeds into this, is the fact that we are crazy. We're all a bunch of crazy people because it takes a crazy person to go into a crowded nightclub and start eliminating people, start randomly shooting at people, killing 49, injuring 53. Yes, there was, I'm sure, a point where this guy got fed up because I guess what we're talking about with this particular individual is the fact that he didn't like his country being bombed back there in Afghanistan where his parents were from. But you have to look at all of the other little things that contributed to this as well. He had been casing this area. This had been something that I guess a lot of folks would consider was calculated, because he then also made a call to 911 pledging his allegiance to ISIS. And we're seeing more and more of these types of things. San Bernardino, what went on in Orlando, and it doesn't fit the profile that this country, this anti-gun lobby wants us to understand. It's not the types of people that they're saying. It's not the law-abiding citizens that are the ones that are causing the problems. It's people that are like these lone wolves, these people that are looking for an opportunity and to not only do what they're doing, but to obtain martyrdom as well. That's a large part of what these folks use as motivation. But again, we'll get back to the actual anti-gun lobby and talk more about that and the way that, I guess, in a lot of ways, Dan, that could be considered brainwashing in order to really affect, generations like mine and yours, but certainly to really influence younger generations that guns are bad, you don't want them in your home, and in a roundabout way, it's really starting to take hold because we're seeing the younger generations really kind of get into this whole mode of, guns are bad and we shouldn't have them and you shouldn't have them, and then it just kind of stems from there.
Well, you used the word brainwashing, and let me just read you a quote from my book. This is Eric Holder, and this will give an example of just how important that type of manipulation is to the anti-gun, lobby or politicians. And Eric Holder said, "I've also worked the school board to make a part of every day some kind of anti-violence, anti-gun message. Every day, every school, at every level. One thing that I think is clear with young people, and with adults as well, is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on Monday and then only do it every Monday." This is Eric Holder. "We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way." Eric Holder, 1995.
9:43 is our time. Our guest is Dan Wass. The name of the book is Good Gun, Bad Guy. Dan, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Jan Morgan. Jan, who wrote the foreword to your book, and we'll get her take on things, and obviously, with the time we have remaining, allow the two of you to really explain the importance of what we've been talking about this morning and the need for people to at least pay attention. We're not trying to convert anyone. We're not trying to say that, if you want to own a gun or you need to own a gun or you should own a gun, it's up to the individual to make the decision for themselves. But it's also important to have a level playing field when we're discussing the issue. 9:43 is our time. We'll be back with more on the Morning Magazine on KRMS. Hear that? We're also joined now by Jan Morgan. Of course, Jan is a returning guest on this particular program. You see her on Fox Business, and she has, I'm sure, been very busy in the last several days with what's been happening in Orlando and the discussion after everything that has been going on. She also wrote the foreword to your book. And Jan, good morning.
Good morning. How are you two doing?
We're doing very well.
Hey, Jan.
Hey, Dan. How are you?
Good.
Well,
Awesome.
I just wanted to interject here and say that, Jan, I remember you recommending this book and recommending the opportunity to interview Dan and talk about this experience. And I tell you what, we've learned a lot about Dan and, of course, a lot about the anti-gunners, as he's referred to him here, and the terminology that they use to put the fear of God, I guess, into people when it comes to firearms and owning a firearm and people who do own firearms. You obviously jumped on board with an opportunity to write the foreword to this book, so tell us a little bit about your involvement.
Well, I guess it was about 6 or 8 months ago, Dan sent me an email and asked me to please take the time to look at his book, and if I was interested to write the foreword. I get books from people all over the country all the time who want me to promote their books or read their books and tell me what they think, and I just don't have time. I'm a very busy person. I own my own business, the gun range here. I'm on Fox News every week, sometimes multiple times, and I have speaking engagements and other kind of media engagements, and so I'm extremely busy. And I told Dan, I said, well, I'd never met him, didn't know him. I said, well, I'll take a look at it when I can, but I can't promise anything. And I finally got around to reading some of it, and once I started, I couldn't put it down. And I realized, wow, I've been needing this book for a long time because I have to engage these people. And Dan, I don't know if you saw what happened to me yesterday. I had to engage Lanny Davis.
I did.
The thing about him, and I was trying to think about the things in your book that would have applied with him in that case. I don't know that anything would have worked with him because he's not just an anti-gunner. He's a pro-Clinton, and he's going to, when you stand up on national television and absolutely lie to the American people like he did yesterday, when he clearly either knows he doesn't know his candidate and what she stands for, which she has clearly stated multiple times on national TV, that she likes the Australian method of gun control. She has clearly stated multiple times that she would like for us to repeal this exemption for gun manufacturers that would prevent them from being sued over the actions of criminals with guns. And so, once again, we would be able to sue gun manufacturers out of business in this country. And, of course, she has made a statement that she thinks there are too many guns in America. And he said everything that I said she said was false, which, I mean, there's video after video after video, proof of that all over the Internet. So, yeah.
Truth doesn't matter, Jan. This is the thing, and we've talked about this before. Truth does not matter. It doesn't matter if it's factual or not, as long as the words get out there and the imagery in the minds of the people listening is altered.
Yes. Well, tell me how you would have dealt with him yesterday, because I could sure have used your help. I got so mad and started pointing my finger at him.
You know, a lot of times is questioning these people is enough. You know, when you put them on the other end of the question, they.
I did that. I did that. I said, "Tell me, just answer the question." I asked him, "Did Hillary or did she not say these things?" And he said,
I remember that.
It's false. Yeah, she did not. Yeah, I wasn't going to shut up until he answered, and then he answered false. She doesn't say any of those things. So I guess he lives in the land of fairy tales and unicorns. I know we don't want to tie up the show talking about yesterday, but I was just livid. But yes, Dan's book is amazing, and the fact that he was once one of those people, he knows how to take us inside the mindset. And I've never read anything from that perspective before, which has helped me to understand them better. I still need a lot of work on how to handle them, because I lose my temper and then I just start yelling at them. So.
Well, and interestingly enough, I think that would be an interesting statistic to show how many people over the years who essentially follow along with the anti-gun lobby, or the anti-gunners, Dan, as you refer to them, have changed their mindset, because you never see those statistics anywhere. And they're, for as many people that support anti-guns, gun control, doing away with guns, there have got to have been people over the years that certainly have maybe been in the same situation as you have with the. We live right there on the edge, where it's not just about what we're seeing in places like Orlando or San Bernardino. There's a very volatile economy. We've got a national debt that is just out of control, and at some point things are going to come to a head. It's like being in a car and hitting a brick wall at 100 miles an hour. It's all going to stop, and when it hits the fan, when all hell breaks loose, people are going to need to be able to defend themselves. And I wonder if that's another area where people are starting to finally wake up and say, listen, if I have to defend myself, I want to be in a position to know what I'm doing, to be able to do it properly, to have the education, as we've talked about before, overcoming the fear through education, and being able to defend my family. So there's a lot of different variables that add up to this. And I'm just curious as far as, people kind of coming around like you did.
Well, logical people think like that. When you don't let your emotions and anger and fear and all that stuff get in the way, logic takes over, and we do see the other, the logical side of the conversation. But the problem is, I think a lot of anti-gunners are so indoctrinated, and the minute that they stray, this is interesting because I've seen this on social media. The instant they stray, and maybe they're just looking for research. Maybe they're looking for doing research to support their agenda. It doesn't matter. When other anti-gunners see this, they lash out. They don't like that. It's kind of like they get shunned, and all sorts of stuff. It's kind of like the argument, the story of the crabs in the box. I don't know if you heard this one. Crabs in the box. The one crab tries to get out. He starts climbing out of the box. What do the other crabs do? They pull him back in. And it seems to be the process with anti-gunners and anti-second radicals. They don't want you to leave, and they'll do anything they can to keep you there and keep you convinced and keep you fearful and keep you ignorant.
Overall,
the media plays a very important role in the narrative, too. And I get so frustrated with media personalities on national television. For example, with this whole Orlando thing, they keep referring to the AR-15 as an assault rifle. You don't have to do much research to determine that the AR-15 used in this situation was not an assault rifle by the government-owned definition. The Department of Defense definition of an assault rifle is a fully automatic battlefield rifle. Neither of the firearms that shooter had was fully automatic, and yet media people will stand out there. I just posted on my social media pages about Gretchen Carlson. I was so disappointed that she is now calling for and supporting the assault weapons ban because she said sometimes common sense comes before the Second Amendment. And I'm saying, really? Really? Did you forget about our founding fathers, what Benjamin Franklin said? Those who are willing to sacrifice liberty for the sake of security deserve neither and will lose both? I mean, what's next? Your freedom of speech.
She flipped, Jan. I saw that this morning, and she flipped. And that's funny because the assault rifle. This is the biggest joke of the whole thing. The assault rifle. They create this assault rifle terminology, and when it comes time to pass bills, you remember Dianne Feinstein trying to describe what an assault rifle
Yes, but basically,
was?
If it looks scary, it's
it was like a clown act watching them try to define this thing. They create the terminology, then they had to define it, and that's where they got stuck. It was funny.
9:56 is. I'm sorry, let me jump in here real quick. 9:56 is our time. And Dan, before we let you go, again, I would just like to interject here with the thought process of we're not trying to convert anyone. We're not trying to say our method of doing things or your method of doing things or whose method of doing things is better than another. You would just...
I don't know. I think my method's pretty good.
Well, I
like my method, too.
I'm just saying my point being to
Sorry, Kevin, we're just kidding.
That's quite all right. And my point being with that is saying, take the opportunity to pick up the book and give it a thorough read and allow it to sink in and look at possibly the way you've been doing things for a while and see if maybe as you got to that point, Dan, where you were feeling uncomfortable and again wanted to do something based on a situation where you felt like you were protecting yourself and protecting your family, and that's essentially what this is all about, just protection. I mean, it's not about going out and wearing a gun and open and showing it off and look what I can do and things like that. It's essentially from the perspective or the point of view is you want to be able to protect yourself, you want to be able to protect your family, and do what's necessary to stay alive in any number of situations. And again, we talk about, how about those people in Orlando? If one person in that room would have had a gun other than the gunman, then they would have been able to equal the or even up the score pretty fast, and more than likely 49 people would not be dead right now. But again, it's that whole mindset. It's getting into the minds of people and saying, hey, listen, for no other reason, check out what I'm talking about here. And as somebody who was on the side of anti-gunners and took a step back and took it all in and heard the lingo and the terminology that was being used and realized what people are trying to do and what the ultimate goal is in this situation, just read the book and you can walk away however you want to walk away, but I would imagine they're probably going to take quite a bit away with them.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, and thank you for that saying that about the book. And it's goodgunbadguy.net or .com, whichever you prefer. But yeah, I appreciate it, Kevin. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, and Jan as well. We wish we could have got you in a little sooner on the discussion here, but always you bring a lot to the table. And again, writing the foreword for this book, obviously you had to feel moved enough that this is a book that people need to check out in order to get a better understanding of what goes on the other side.
It was an honor to write the foreword, and absolutely all of us have some people in our lives who have this mentality about firearms. And as you said, it gives us a way to talk to them. It helps us understand their mindset so that we may be in a position to better influence minds and hearts.